for future use. So once this webinar is over, we will be putting this up on our website, and we will share that with you. We will also be sharing some application instructions in case you need those as you go along, get started in the system. So let's begin. The Organizational Grant Program is a 2-year grant. It's meant to support organizations through project-based funding. However, the project is really whatever your biggest need is. This funding is meant to strengthen the nonprofit art sector, and we're hoping that this funding can support quality arts programs that enrich the lives of LA County residents. So something that we sometimes say is that this is general operating support disguised as project-based funding. So really what you're doing with this application is giving us a snapshot of where your organization is today, kind of the evolution of the organization, and what your biggest need is, and that's what your project is going to be. This is reimbursement-based funding, so basically what we're doing is reimbursing you for funding that has been spent out. You also have a requirement of providing a cash match. The cash match can be earned or contributed revenue, but you do have to have a dollar-for-dollar match for every dollar of the grant. So as I was saying, the project can be really overarching. A lot of the times this funding is being used for salaries. It can be used for an annual event that you do every year. It varies, and it just kind of depends on how you explain it in your application. So we'll go through more details on that. In terms of eligibility, right now we have updated some of our eligibility criteria. So of course the tax exempt status 501c3 organizations are eligible, and this year we are now allowing fiscally sponsored organizations with a Model A agreement, comprehensive agreement with their fiscal sponsor, to be eligible as well. The other eligibility requirements are that you have a principal offices in Los Angeles County, and the way that we would verify that is through looking at your 990 tax form. We require that your primary mission be to provide arts programming. The organization's budget should be at the very least 50% or more dedicated to arts programming and activities. You should have a functioning board of directors and at least 2 years of programming completed at the time of application. Organizations that are not currently eligible to apply are organizations whose primary mission is actually to raise funds. Educational institutions such as university schools, organizations like who provide like a diploma at the end of participation, organizations who are city or county departments or 501c3 partners of those county or city departments or agencies. Individual artists are not eligible. If you're using a fiscal sponsor and it's a Model C agreement or a different type of agreement, you would not be eligible. Social service, religious, or welfare organizations are not eligible. However, if you think that you may fall under that category, you may be eligible for the Community Impact Arts Grant. And if that's the case, please feel free to reach out to us so we can send you information about that program. Organizations who are not open to the public are not eligible. So this would be if you are kind of a private organization where you do not open your doors to anyone who's not a member, for example, you would not be eligible. And then if you have a deficit of 20% or more of your expenses for the last 2 years, consecutive years, you would also not be eligible. So this year we have, as I was saying earlier, we have incorporated some new changes. And mostly what we're hoping is that the changes that we've incorporated will make it slightly easier for you to apply. They're changes meant to streamline the application for the most part. If you're new, this is all new, but if you're an applicant that is reapplying and you've applied in the past, you'll see some changes. So number one, we've streamlined the application. OGP 1 organizations who are requesting support for sustainability projects may now use their organizational narrative as the project narrative. So meaning you can actually skip some of the questions in the project narrative task of the application. And that is meant to reduce redundancy and streamline the application process. We also have incorporated a change for our matching income revenue form. So basically what that means is when you're filling out the projected revenue, you no longer have to provide an itemized list of the sources of your income. You may now just give us a text answer, a summary of where you're projecting the matching sources of funds will be coming from. And I'll show you that budget in a couple of slides. We now have updated our grant request formula. This is a change that is beginning this year. Basically what we did this year is over the last couple of months, have been working with a statistician to help us basically recalibrate our grant request formula. And the grant request formula is basically our calculator. It's how you find out how much you can request. All of that is based on budget size. So depending on your budget size, you'll know how much you can request. So the impact of this change is to slightly decrease the request amount for organizations with budgets over $40 million and increase request amounts for organizations with small to mid-sized budgets. And you'll see that if you're applying again, after having applied in the past, you might see that there may be an increase in the request amount when you pop your budget size into the calculator. I told you this before, but we've also updated our eligibility requirement for fiscally sponsored organizations. In the past, we did not allow any fiscally sponsored organizations to be eligible. That has changed. We now allow organizations with Model A comprehensive sponsorship to apply. We're hoping that this will increase inclusion and address the needs of the field for the smaller budget organizations that we know have deep relationships with community and that we're hoping to be able to support through OGP. Another change is all of our workshops this year will be provided online instead of in person due to the safer at home precautions around the COVID-19 pandemic. So we are basically going to be providing all of these workshops through Zoom and recording them, so you'll have access to them at a later time if you would like to revisit them. And then the last change is that we have a new grant portal. We have migrated from Fluid Review to another portal, which is hosted by the same company. It's called SurveyMonkey Apply. Fluid Review was a SurveyMonkey product, and so we've basically migrated to a upgraded version of it, and it's called SurveyMonkey Apply. It's a brand new URL, and you'll see that at the bottom of the screen. So when you decide to go in and start your application, just note that it will be a different URL. So either way, please make sure that you read through the guidelines thoroughly for all the details and information you'll need about all of these changes. Basically, all of the information I'm going to go through is you'll be able to read in detail in the guidelines. Make sure to look at the updated sample application as well. It's linked on our website. You can see all of the questions that we will be asking in that sample application. And like I was saying earlier, if you feel like you have some questions after this webinar is over, feel free to send an email over to us and we will send you more information. So let's look at our checklist. We've created this checklist to basically give you a snapshot of what you'll need to have on your desktop before you apply, before you even start the application. So these are some of the things that you'll need to have. Number one, there are a couple of financial documents you'll need. Before you know what your request amount is, you'll need to pull what is called an OGP funder report. That funder report is downloaded from the Data Arts website. Culturaldata.org is the URL that you'll use to do that. In order for you to download a current OGP funder report, you'll need to first make sure that you've completed the last 3 years of financial information. Basically, it's a questionnaire on the cultural data profile in that website. So SMU Data Arts profiles. And I'll tell you more about SMU Data Arts, but basically this is really the first step for applying to this grant. You want to make sure that you have completed those last 3 years of information for your last 3 years. And after doing that, you can download what's called the OGP funder report from that website. You'll want a copy of that funder report to be on your desktop. You will want to make sure you have a copy of your most recent federal form 990, 990EZ or 990N, depending on your budget size. And for fiscally sponsored organizations, you'll also want to make sure you have either that you have internal financials, and I'll tell you what that is once we get to the financials portion of the workshop, but you'll want to make sure you've got some internal financials to submit as well as the fiscal sponsors 990. If your budget is over $2 million in the last fiscal year, you'll also want to make sure you have an audit, that you have a completed audit that you can provide a copy of in the application. So those are financials. Then we have a second category of documentation, which is the cultural equity and inclusion statement, policy, or plan. Depending on your budget size, you'll need either a board adopted statement, a policy, or a plan regarding your organization's alignment with the Cultural Equity and Inclusion Initiative. Again, I will go into this in detail, but you'll need to have that ready. You'll also need to have the proof of board adoption with that. And proof of board adoption is meeting minutes or a document that states that your board members have approved that document formally. So you need a copy of that. And then lastly, the artistic documentation. So depending on what discipline you're applying under, you'll provide either a video, a PowerPoint, audio, published materials, or images of the work that you're doing. There's some supplemental documents that you may want to provide. So these do not apply to every applicant. So arts education, the arts education organizations who are required to provide a curriculum sample, you'll want to make sure you have a copy of that curriculum. You may want to provide letters of recommendation, reviews, or marketing materials. And so the letters of recommendation, the reviews, and the marketing materials, those are all optional. You're not required to submit those. It's helpful, especially if you're a new organization, to provide those, but you're not required to. So I'll stop to make sure I answer any questions in the chat. And I'll let Anne, do you want to just share any questions in the chat box?
Yes, so we had a question. What if we're young and only have 2 years of CDP reports?
Great question. So if your organization has not completed 3 years of programming yet, that's fine. You can provide the funder report with the last 2 years of financial information. That's fine to do that.
let's see. And we also have someone just asking what is OGP 1?
Okay, so the OGP 1, 2, 3, and 4, I'm going to get into in the next slide. So I will answer that in just a second. If there's any other questions about the checklist, we can take those now.
What if our accountants filed an e-postcard for our first 990?
That's fine. You can provide a copy of the 990 postcard.
Let's see, if we're a fiscally sponsored project, do we need proof of board adoption of an equity plan for our fiscal sponsor or our organization?
Your organization. So you may have an advisory board. You'll want to make sure that those folks are the ones that approve your statement. Okay. Anything else?
Let's see, if we are arts education after school, can the school be a partner?
Yeah, we have a lot of arts education organizations who work directly with schools. That's fine. We allow that. And we're going to go more into detail about arts education specific applications. So if you have more questions about that, we can answer them. Okay. So anything else, Anne, in the chat?
Not right now, no.
All right, let's move on to preparing your financial forms. So we just gave you that checklist just as a snapshot. So we'll go into a little bit more detail about the financials first. And the reason we go into the financials first is because you're not going to know what your request amount even is until you do this piece of it. So the OGP program uses budget categories. So this is OGP 1, 2, 3, and 4. Depending on your budget size, you'll know what your budget category is. So, and this is all based on your OGP funder report. So if your budget is under $200,000, your organization would be an OGP 1 organization. If your budget is between 200,000 and under $1 million, it would be OGP 2. OGP 3 is split in half, and I'll tell you why. So OGP 3 are organizations with budgets between 1 million and under 15 million. The financial requirements for OGP 3 will vary. If your budget is under $2 million and you're an OGP 3 organization, you do not need to provide an audit. But if your budget is over 2 million, so your budget is between 2 million and 15 million, then you're required to provide a financial audit. So you'll see on the box on the screen, you'll be able to figure out which is which. And then OGP 4 obviously is the largest budget organization. Any organization with a budget over $15 million. We don't have too many in that category. Most of our organizations are in the OGP 1 and 2 category. I believe it's about 86% of our organizations are in those two categories. So like I was saying earlier, you're going to want to make sure that you've submitted all of the CDP information so that you can look at your funder report and figure out what your budget size is according to that document. And then you'll also want to make sure that you have a 990 that matches. So basically what we're doing is we're looking at the funder report, and that funder report shows 3 years of data. The most recent data, the most recent year is the end year, right? So it would be like if you're showing us 2017, 18, and 19, the end year is 2019. So we're looking at all of that information and kind of taking a look at how you've done over the last 3 years, change over time, basically. When you submit your 990, you're going to want to make sure that that 990, the end year of the 990 matches the end year of the funder report. So if you're submitting a 2019 funder report that ends 2019, your 990 needs to end in 2019. And then for fiscally sponsored organizations, you're basically providing profit and loss to kind of supplement the information that we see, because the 990 and the information that we see on that document will be for your fiscal sponsor, but the panelists will also want to make sure that they can see some of your internal financial documents. So you'll want to make sure you have that for that same fiscal year. So funder report ending in 19, then all of the other documents also ending in 19. And there may be some organizations that don't have 2019 financials yet, and that is acceptable as long as the financial document that you provide ends no later than December 2018. So basically you can submit a 2018 financial document as long as the end month is December. Can't be September, it can't be July, it can't be June. It would have to be a December 2018 financial document. And then the audit should match those two other documents, right? So it should also align with the years that you're submitting for the other two documents. So I'll stop there. I thought I saw some chats coming up. And do you have any questions from the chat box?
No, actually, I don't see any new ones.
Okay, I'll move on. So like I was saying earlier, your request amount is based on your budget size. It's a percentage of your annual budget for the last completed fiscal year. That annual budget from your funder report does not include endowment funds or in-kind revenue funds. So that's why the funder report is the way that we find out what your budget size is, because it's a specific formula that excludes any endowment funding and any in-kind funding. So make sure you don't use your 990 to figure out what your budget size is. That would be an error on your application. It would then cause an error on on your request amount and on all of your budgets. Make sure it's from your funder report. So most of our, like I was saying, most of our grantees are have a budget size of under $1 million. OGP 1 and 2 is about 86%. This year we recalibrated our OGP request formula with the help of a statistician. And we're hoping that by doing this, it will provide a little bit, it will cushion your request amount a little bit if your budget is between a small and a mid-sized budget. Additionally, a very large budget organization will see a slight decrease in the request amount. These changes we're hoping will bring us into better alignment with the purpose and values of this program, which is to sustain and strengthen small to mid-sized organizations. So when you finally get that funder report on your computer and you take a look at that funder report, you're going to see on the very top of the screen, and I'll show you a sample of what this looks like, there's going to be a red number. It's going to say OGP budget size. That number is the number you'll pop into the request calculator either on our website or directly in our application. So if you want to preview, you can do this on our website before actually getting into the application. The request amount, so the budget size will be popped into this calculator. You'll click the calculate button, and that will give you your maximum grant request. So for example, if your budget was $112,300 for last year, your request might be $40,462. That maximum request is for 2 years. And what we recommend is that all applicants request 100% of that number. Don't break it in half. make sure you put that whole number 40462, for example, if this was your budget, put that whole number in the grant request question on the application. No organization will receive 100% of that number. In fiscal year 2021, awardees received about 41% of that request. And I'll show you the way that it works out and how the number of applicants kind of affects the maximum, what you actually end up receiving. But you want to make sure you're eligible for the maximum. And so this number from the grant calculator is the maximum that you can request. This calculator is a tool that will automatically calculate your request amount using that number from the page 1 of the funder report. We created this with the help of the statistician and have updated it since then. 5 years later, we took a look at the formula behind this calculator to make sure that it was aligned with how we are looking at our data, what we're seeing, and so it's been recalibrated. And so hopefully this will make it easier for you to figure out what your request amount should be. So this is a sample of the actual funder report. When you download it, it's going to be several pages. The very first page is it has the header. So this is where you're going to see at the very top, the title will be Los Angeles County Department of Arts and Culture, OGP Funder Report. Be very careful because we are not the only funder that requests funder reports from SMU Data Arts website. I know that Department of Cultural Affairs has a funder report. So that's the City of LA. They have a funder report you would need to also download if you're requesting funding from the City of LA. Make sure you don't submit that City of LA funder report. It should say Los Angeles County Department of Arts and Culture, OGP funder report. On the header, you'll see the OGP budget size. That's the red number. Once you find out what that number is, you can then pop that number into the grant request calculator. So if you are not familiar with SMU Data Arts, I'll just give you a brief, just kind of overview of what SMU Data Arts and the cultural data profile is. The SMU Data Arts is basically, it's kind of like a clearinghouse. It's a tool for advocacy. It's a website. What happens on this website is organizations from throughout all over the nation are putting in programmatic, financial, marketing, and administrative information about their organization every year. So if you're a first-time applicant, you're going to be putting in 3 years of data. But if you're coming back, you've applied before and you're just returning, you're just basically putting it in at each year, you're submitting the newest information. And so many foundations and government grant programs are using this data. They're using it to understand the field better, to understand what's going on, to see trends, according to like what's happening across disciplines, across geographic areas, across budget sizes. So this website is really, really important. And so the really great thing is that once you've done this, having that data in this kind of clearinghouse, you'll be able to pull funder reports for other grant programs. So you don't have to do this from scratch each time you're going to apply to another program. If it's already in there through this cultural data profile, you'll be able to pull different types of funder reports depending on what grant you're applying to. So all applicants are starting here. They're starting with this step. This is kind of, it's probably the most important step in the application process. It's also the most time consuming, which is why we kind of put this up front. We want to make sure that you have enough time to submit this data. The SMU Data Arts team is amazing. They are very responsive. If it's your first time doing this, submitting cultural data, they will walk you through it. And they're available throughout the whole application period, and they're ready for questions from our applicants. We let them know when our application opens and closes every year, and they are basically ready to help. They help our applicants every year, and have heard and seen all kinds of different questions and information. So, you know, feel free to reach out to them. They're very welcoming. They want to hear if there's any issues or any questions or technical problems that you have as you're putting this information into the system. They will help you through it. And one of the things that might be tricky is that if it's your first time, you may be basically having to take a bunch of accounting information and translating it into cultural data profile responses. So if you have like a hard time kind of figuring out like, how do I answer this question depending on what my accounting system looks like, they can help you sort that out. So if it's your first time, you may want to take advantage. They have webinars on their website. And you would basically want to go to culturaldata.nonprofitsoapbox.com/calendar to see what upcoming webinars are available. And then just complete those steps. So step 1 is obviously the 3 years of data profiles that you need to submit. If you haven't done, and then afterwards, what you want to do is make sure you have completed your balance sheet. And then after that is when you can download the OGP funder report. Just a quick note, the funder report is not sent to us by Data Arts. We are depending on you as the applicant to download that document and submit it to us through the application. So make sure you do that and that you follow that step. Make sure you give yourself enough time to complete these steps. They may take a few hours, it may take a few days. Either way, it's really important to make sure you have enough time for this, because if you don't have a funder report at the time of application, it's not submitted with your application, it will be an incomplete and possibly ineligible application. This is what it looks like on our application where you submit the funder report. So there is a question that asks you to basically submit the document. So you would choose the file, find that document in your computer, attach it, and then tell us what the end year of that funder report is. And I should add, if you haven't looked through the funder report, you should definitely make sure to take a glance at it, at the very least. Make sure you look at it, because there may be things that you want to explain for the panelists that are reading your application. For example, like big dips or spikes in programming or in revenue or in programming, you're going to want to make sure you explain any of that. For example, one thing that I've seen is maybe there sometimes are applicants who receive really big grants in one year. And then they do the programming, and then the next year there's a big dip because that grant was only for maybe 1 year. So you would want to explain things like that, any deficits or surpluses of 10% or more. So you have the opportunity to explain all of that in this box on the application, the one that says OGP Funder Report Explanations. And I'll stop there in case there's any questions.
Yes. Is the budget amount from the funders report used from 2019 only?
It would either be, so it depends on what financials you're going to be submitting. So if you're using 2019 financials, that would mean your 990 would need to be ending in 2019, your funder report, and if you have an audit, your audit as well. But if your funder report ends in, or if your 990 ends in 2018, then you would want to make sure your funder report also ends in 2018 so that it all matches.
And that's it for now.
Okay. So how are these grant awards calculated? Big question. The way that this works is basically we take your budget size, and based off of that budget size, you get the request amount. It's a percentage of that number. After doing that math, we get the maximum request amount, right? And so we multiply that maximum request by the score, the average score that you receive from the panelists after they've reviewed your application. Everyone will have a maximum funding, a maximum number, right, that they're allowed to request based on the request amount multiplied by the panel score. That amount for the last couple of years has been, when we aggregate it, when we sum up everyone's allowable request, has been more than our actual program budget. So we will shrink that amount down to squeeze everybody's request into our right now it's 4.1 million. In the past, it's been 4.5 million. We will shrink your request amount down equitably across all organizations to make sure that we are able to give you as much as we possibly can, depending on how many applicants are in the pool and how much the total program request is across all, after aggregating all request amounts. So this is an example in hard numbers. Let's say your budget size was $200,000 last year. Based off that, your request might have been $43,750 and your score was a 98. So 98% of 43750, you get a fundable request of 42,875. We will shrink that 42875 down. Last year, or this past year, we shrunk it down to 41% of that number. And the reason it was 41%, past couple of years, it's hovered in around the 50% mark. This past year, we did have a program budget cut due to the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we did actually have to reduce everyone's requests another 8%. So everyone received about 41% of their request, of their allowable request. And so with that $4.1 million last year, sorry, not last year, in 2020, the $4.1 million is supporting 214 grantees, and they each received 41% of their request amount. So if there's no questions about that piece, we will move on to the project categories.
Okay, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Is someone in our organization also available, or is someone in your organization also available if we have questions when we see our funder report?
Yes. Yes, but funder report questions, it might be better to ask those questions from data arts, because if you're seeing something weird or something that you don't understand on your funder report, it might be that you want to ask data arts in case maybe there was an error on the way that you filled out your data profile. So yes, definitely you can always reach out to us about anything on your application, but if it seems like it's something more specifically about the funder report or the CDP, the cultural data profile, then you'd want to reach out to SMU Data Arts, and we have their helpline information is on our guidelines. It's also in the application, I believe.
Okay, and do you find out your score?
Yes. After we basically document everything, we will provide you with your score, and if you would like to hear panel comments, we also can provide you with a summary of the panel feedback from the panel review. So all of that happens basically after July when you get your decision notification.
Okay, and that's it for now?
Okay. So OGP, we also, in addition to the project category, the budget categories, we have project categories. And these project categories are kind of, they're a way for us internally to understand where the funding is going, what types of requests we're receiving. So you may have a project that falls under more than one of these project categories. And basically what you would want to do is just figure out which of these categories represents your request in the best way. And I'll give you the definition of these. But basically OGP 1, 2, and 3 organizations, you can apply under any of these. You can apply for sustainability, organizational capacity, artistic capacity, or accessibility. OGP 4 may only request funding for accessibility projects. So basically what you want to do is just take some time to think about what your biggest need is and which of these project categories encapsulates that need. For sustainability, these are projects that support existing artistic and/or administrative projects that help sustain the mission and goals of the art organization. So this can be, for example, continued compensation and benefits for staff. It might be ongoing costs for production supplies, equipment, or rent. It may be continuing support for marketing, governance, or fund development activities, continuation of artistic programming, for example, payments to artists or payments to production staff, or continuing IT efforts, computer upgrades, software, and website improvements. And we know right now is a challenging time. You may have in this past year had to figure out how to go virtual. That type of pivot, like when you are trying to figure out how to sustain your programming in a different way, that might be a sustainability project. So you would want to definitely just kind of look through and see, what are my expenses going to be? And is this an existing set of costs? Or is it new? Maybe you're doing something new. And if it's new, that might be either organizational capacity. So organizational capacity is support for new projects that increase the organizational capacity and infrastructure of the organization. This might be things like establishing new staff positions, administrative staff positions. Maybe there are significant IT improvements, like implementation of accounting, box office, or fund development software. Maybe it's a development and implementation of new plans or strategies like marketing, public relations, maybe research or a cultural equity and inclusion strategy. Maybe it's board development activities. Maybe what you're requesting is support for new development activities like creation of an individual giving program or development of new earned income strategies like development of a program to increase revenue through concessions or rental activities. That would be an organizational capacity project. Additionally, we have artistic capacity. So this is similar, except this is for artistic projects. So this would be additional salaries, benefits, fees for artistic staff, commissions for new work, increased rehearsal time for performing artists, exhibition costs, training opportunities for teaching artists, new or increased employment for one or more positions that impacts the artistic product, like the technical director, lighting, or costume designer. The key word here is new, though. So if it's something new that you've never done before, you've never commissioned this project before, that would be a new artistic capacity project. And then lastly, accessibility. Accessibility projects are projects that support new or existing activities that provide public access to the arts, right? So artistic programming, artistic activities. Arts education programming is accessibility programming. If you're providing audience development activities for specific segments of the population, like low-income communities, people of color, LGBTQ, people with disabilities, or other communities who experience barriers to arts participation, that would be an accessibility project. Lastly, activities that broaden, deepen, or diversify arts participation. All of this would be an accessibility project. And OGP 4 is only allowed to support this type of a project. So another example, in addition to arts education activities, a lot of times large scale museums may have a free Thursday or free Friday or free programming like on a monthly basis. Those might be accessibility projects supported through the OGP program. So I'll stop here for any questions about project categories.
Okay, yes. Can you apply for more than one category for different projects?
No, you would have to select one project category and basically summarize. You are allowed to, you know, put more than one type of expense on your project expense budget, but the summary of the project, it has to be defined by one of these categories. So you'd have to select one.
Okay, and I think this is a theoretical. If we want to add staff to payroll for the first time, staff that has been providing mostly in-kind services, but has been paid a bit as an independent contractor, does that fall under sustainability or organizational capacity?
That sounds like organizational capacity to me. Sustainability would be more like if they had been a staff person and you're just wanting to continue to pay their salary.
All right, is there a way to find out which category is less competitive than another category?
That's a great question. We do not, so there's no kind of strategy around this for us. We do not basically give one more importance than another. The only advantage I would say in the way that you choose your project is that there may be, so there are organizations that really what they do every year is like one kind of festival or one series of programs, and maybe their project is really just to sustain that. And I think if that sounds like it might be you, what it does is it makes it a little bit easier for you to apply. We have now created the ability for you to so you don't have to submit a new project as like your proposal. You can just provide all of that information in the organizational narrative, and that is a little bit of an advantage because the application is streamlined. But other than that, we don't give one of these categories more importance than another. There's no dollars. Basically, there's no like dollar matchup, right? Like we don't give exactly $50,000 to this type of category versus this type of category. These categories are really more internal for us as the staff and for our advocacy work to understand what types of requests we are receiving.
Okay, if you have paid artists as independent contractors, but are now paying as non-exempt employees, would this fall under organizational capacity or as artistic capacity?
It depends on the type of role. So if it's an administrative role, it would be organizational capacity. But if it's like the artistic director's role, for example, or somebody that actually works on the artistic product, then it would be artistic capacity.
Okay. And do the grant reviewers look back at past projects and mark against you if you apply for the same category each time?
Oh, that's another great question. No, we every year it's a new set of panelists, and they do not look at, they don't get to see your last application for the last time you submitted. So yeah, feel free to, you know, if your biggest need continues to be, you know, paying for your executive director's salary, continue to support that salary through the OGP. This is one of the only grants that allows you to do this. So really it's great. It's good to be strategic about the way that you're using the funding, especially right now with this kind of challenging moment that we're all facing.
Okay, and that's it for now.
All right, thanks, Anne. So let's talk about our cultural equity and inclusion vision. As you might know by now, you've probably heard about it. We do have a cultural equity and inclusion initiative. There's a timeline on the screen so that you can kind of understand just at a glance the trajectory of this work. Basically in 2015, the Board of Supervisors adopted a motion to create a framework for advancing cultural equity among the region's arts and cultural sector. They mandated that there be a county-wide conversation about this. So the LA County Arts Commission, which is, we're now the department, but we used to be the Arts Commission, in 2016, created an 18-month public process. It included town halls, focus groups, research, and we put together an advisory committee to basically discuss and to lift up some recommendations. And that's what happened in 2016. We lifted up some recommendations from all of these different activities and the research. Those recommendations, it was 13 of them, were published in a 2017 report that we released that kind of laid all of this out. If you haven't read this report, I highly recommend downloading it from our website. There's a link on the screen to do that. And taking a look at it, especially if it's your first time and you've never applied for this grant before. You're going to want to make sure you're familiar with this report and the way that we are talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. This report is what we kind of use as a kind of a way to start really centering this as our vision and as the lens for everything we do throughout the whole department. Like every division is talking about this at every meeting. So really we're hoping that, as this work continues on, obviously the way we talk about it is it's a continuum. There's no like end point. This is going to continue to be a journey for the art sector and for us as a department to kind of push this work forward. So in 2017, we released that report. In 2018, there was a new requirement that was implemented for all applicants to the OGP program. And that requirement is one of the recommendations that came out of that public process. So now as of 2018, what we've asked is that all applicants submit a statement, policy, or plan about this work. And so I'll get to more details about it. But along with this kind of cultural equity and inclusion initiative, another one of the recommendations was that we create a cultural policy for the county. So that has been done. We actually released this cultural policy that was accepted by the board this year, along with a new anti-racism policy agenda that also passed. And so what we're hoping is that these two pieces together will really provide a foundation for pushing our vision even further as we continue to strive and foster diversity, equity, access, and inclusion in all that we do through a deeper commitment to reversing structural and systemic inequality in Los Angeles County. So if you want to read more about any of this work, you can use these links on the screen. We have a quote on the screen. This is directly from that policy agenda. What are we envisioning? We're envisioning improved educational outcomes, better physical and mental health care and outcomes, increased housing and housing stability, meaningful employment opportunities, and an equitable and fair criminal justice system. And we know that the arts kind of is interspersed within all of that, within policy, within the work that's being done across communities. So really, we're hoping that, as the art sector kind of is thinking through all of this, that you are, that you're able to kind of articulate your work around this, your alignment with this vision in your application by providing this either statement, policy, or plan. So on the screen, you're going to see the requirement is based on your budget size. So OGP 1 and 2 organizations, the organizations with budgets under $1 million, the minimum requirement is a statement. And the statement, I'll give you a definition of what the statement should look like, but really it's like, how are you aligning the work with this vision? OGP 2, also a minimum requirement is a statement, but you're encouraged, if you can, to provide a policy. It's not a requirement, but it's encouraged. The OGP 3 and 4 organizations, budgets over $1 million, you're required at a minimum to provide a policy and a plan. So those two things. And all organizations, in addition to the statement, policy, or plan, have to also provide proof that the board adopted these documents. So we will have a question on the application that asks both, what are you submitting, statement, policy, plan, and also upload the proof of adoption. We have an FAQ on our website in case you kind of want to take a look at it, and the URL to that FAQ document is on the screen. You can use that to kind of link and look through some of the frequently asked questions around this. And really the goal here is that organizations are through these statements, policies, and plans, thinking about how to achieve greater equity, inclusion, and access, not just diversity. And we're hoping that that these documents are really talking about if you're an OGP 1 or 2 organization, that you're talking at least about one of the 5 key areas that we are addressing. So board of directors, staffing, audiences, programming, and then artists/creators. One of those 5 key areas, you should be addressing those 5 key areas in your statement, policy, or plan. The plan, though, for organizations with larger budgets, your plan should actually address all 5. It's highly encouraged that you address all 5 of these key areas, and that you submit strategies and methods for measuring your work around this, your success around increasing diversity, equity, inclusion around these 5 key areas. So what is a statement? A statement is a brief explanation of why the organization is committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, and how is the work aligned with the overall mission of the organization. A policy is an outline. It's the outline the organization's using for a broad vision of and how they're committing to diversity, equity, and inclusion and access, and the way that the alignment kind of informs the overall mission. This should all be defined in the statement, and then further details, the what, are provided in the policy. And then how is the plan? How is this organization addressing these issue areas, right? So provide the way that the organization is complying fully with the policy, and how you're evaluating the work around this policy on an annual basis. So I'll stop here in case there's any questions.
No, not at the moment.
Okay, great. So a checklist for you all on the screen. If it's your very first time, you want to make sure you have looked at our report. And then if you would like to, if you need a little bit more assistance, maybe this is your first time and you need some guidance around how to get your board members in the room to talk about this. This is a difficult conversation maybe for your board members. We have technical assistance where we are providing workshops, free workshops, through Aspire Group, who have been conducting these workshops for the last 2 years for our grantees. So those workshops are coming up, and there is still room for you to RSVP. And if you're interested in attending, visit our workshops page, so lacountyarts.org/CEII workshops. You'll find the link to RSVP to one of those 2 workshops that are coming up on September 9th and 11th. And then there are also some opportunities to attend through the nonprofit partnership. They are hosting the Aspire group around one of these workshops as well. So take a look at our workshops link. There's also a toolkit, and the FAQ is on that page as well. Once you've kind of gotten your board members in the room, discussed it, and created a statement, policy, or plan, they would need to approve it. So approval may be at a board meeting. Maybe you submit board minutes from that meeting where they approved those documents. You would want to submit the meeting minutes from that day when they approved it. The other ways that I've seen organizations submit proof is there may be the board president and secretary provide a kind of a statement that says that the board members met. It says when they met and how they approved it. Was it through a phone vote? Was it through, you know, a Zoom meeting vote? So you want to make sure you document that if you would like to do it that way, and then submit those documents. The other way that I've seen organizations do this is some organizations have actually updated their bylaws to include cultural equity and inclusion language. You can upload your bylaws if that's something that you've done. You can actually provide that. There may be applicants who have already submitted this with a prior application. If you are one of these organizations and you want to just reuse the last statement, policy, or plan that you submitted from the last application, you do have the opportunity to do that. That being said, make sure that we actually have those documents, because if we can't find those documents, like if you say we submitted something last time and we want to reuse that, but we don't have record of those documents, your application will be considered incomplete. So just be really careful with that, and make sure that you kind of figure out, do you want to reuse? And if not, if you're submitting something that's been updated, you'll have the opportunity to kind of submit something newer that's been updated. So, you know, you'll see that all in the application when you get to the task about cultural equity and inclusion. And just a reminder, this is all meant to be kind of a collaborative effort. We're hoping that the leadership is involved, that you include executive board members of the organization. So keep in mind that, you know, that those are the individuals who would benefit the most from some of these workshops. And so you may want to kind of try to get them to attend one of these, as because this is really meant for those board members, those executive leaders of the organization, to kind of get this conversation started. So yeah, so anyway, take a look at our workshops page and then RSVP if you'd like to attend one of those workshops. Okay, so artistic documentation. Depending on your budget, sorry, not on your budget, depending on your discipline, we have 14 different disciplines. Depending on your discipline, you're going to have a specific type of sample that you need to provide with your application. So on our in our guidelines on page, I believe it's 19, you'll see there's a table that tells you what type of sample corresponds with your discipline. This is something you're going to want to really take some time with, figure out, you know, how can you show off your best work? This is your chance to bring that narrative, all of that information you put in the application, to life. So really take that opportunity to give them a snapshot of your best work. Some guidelines around this. If you are providing a video, make sure that the video is of good quality, that it is not too large of a file, because we don't want you to have experience slowness on the application if you're submitting a really giant sized file. So make sure that your video is of good quality, but that it's the size of the file is not too large for for you to get that, that through the application system. Images are allowed for certain organizations, and if you are submitting images, you are required to put them on a PowerPoint slideshow. So don't just put in a bunch of random photos or images, like just single images. They need to be on a PowerPoint slideshow. Audio is also acceptable. The music organizations may want to submit audio, so you can submit audio. Make sure also that those are of good production quality so that the panelists, as they're listening or watching this stuff, aren't having a hard time like trying to hear or trying to see what you're trying to show them. Either way, videos and audio, they can be up to 5 minutes long, and you can submit up to 2 pieces. So, you know, that's maybe two different videos, maybe one video, one audio file, maybe one video and one PowerPoint, depending on what you want to submit. Just make sure you follow the artistic sample guidelines. Pay attention to what you're submitting. Make sure you don't submit just promotional material. We want to make sure you're not submitting just like a marketing piece. It really should be something thoughtful that allows the panelists to kind of have a little bit of a feel for what your programming is. So you can provide a compilation, but it should be edited in a way where it's not just like really quick cuts and you're not getting like a feel for what exactly is happening on the screen or what's happening in the audio or in the PowerPoint. So be really thoughtful about the way you edit it, and just, you know, be mindful that this is a big portion of the score. The artistic quality criteria, you get up to 35 points for artistic quality. And this means they are looking at your artistic samples, you know, with an eye for high quality programming. They're also looking at your narrative to kind of see how you're talking about the way that you're putting this work together. They're also looking at your mission. So all of this goes into the artistic quality criterion, but the samples really, they can really serve your application. They, like, if it's just like a medium quality narrative, they can really bring that quality to life. They can boost your application, they can boost your score if it's a nice quality sample. So really you just want to make sure that that they're relevant. If you're producing a festival, for example, show them what that festival looks like. If you're producing exhibits, show them what an exhibit at your space looks like. Give them a snapshot of the audience. They, you know, make sure that the audience looks engaged, and that, especially if it's an arts education sample, that you're giving them a little bit of a feel for the teaching and learning that's happening. Arts education samples definitely want to make sure that the students look engaged and that they're having a good time. Capture those panelists' attention immediately. So engage them in the work, you know, at the beginning. So don't put your best stuff at the end or in the middle. Put it at the very beginning. Be mindful that they may not watch the whole thing. You get up to 5 minutes per piece, but they may not watch more than 2 minutes. So just be mindful, you know, you want to capture their attention right at the beginning. And then lastly, make sure you describe your sample in a way that helps them make sense of what they're seeing. If there's something unique that you want the viewer to see, give them a teaser in the explanation of what they should look out for in the, you know, within the description of the sample. So I've put together 2 just kind of examples of some high quality artistic samples from last year's applications. So let's look at the first one. So this is Independent Shakespeare Company. They're an OGP2 organization. They applied under the theater discipline, and they submitted a PowerPoint as one of their samples. This organization basically submitted a proposal to support artistic salaries of the Griffith Park Free Shakespeare Festival, an annual presentation of an entire summer of professional theater presented free to audiences. The way that they describe the sample is it is 10 images from the Griffith Park Free Shakespeare Festival from 2018 and 2019. 2018, A Midsummer Night's Dream, Titus Andronicus, 2019, Twelfth Night, and Pericles. So I think what's great about these samples, you get one image per slide, you get to see kind of who directed this piece, when it was shown, like when was it shown to audiences, and a little bit about who was in it. It's very simple, but it does a great job of kind of giving you a snapshot. And this is really tricky with theater organizations in particular who may not be able to provide video. This is a good way to kind of, if you aren't able to provide like a really great quality video, maybe you can capture some of that through images, and the way that you put it together, the way that you provide the sample to the panelists can really make all the difference. The other thing that's great about this sample that you may have seen is that they gave a quick, just a snapshot of the audience. So you got to see what the audience looked like. And that's something that the panelists always look for. So I'll stop in case there's questions, and then I'll show you a video.
Yes, sorry. Can you hear me? There are questions.
Oh, I can hear you.
Okay. So can there be multiple images on the PDF?
Yes. Well, actually, no, I'm sorry. No. Actually, the rule is no more than one image per slide and no more than 10 slides.
Okay.
But you can submit more than 2 PowerPoints. Oh, sorry, not more than 2 PowerPoints. You can submit more than 1 artistic sample. So if you did want to submit, you know, one PowerPoint sample that has like a variety of programming, and then maybe one that's just one specific production to go more into depth on that production, you could potentially do that.
Okay. What is the maximum file size for artistic documentation?
I'm actually not sure. I think it says it in the application. That's a great question. I mean, I think anything more than like 5 megabytes. I probably should follow up because I'm not actually sure what the exact requirement is. I don't think we say like you can't submit anything larger than 5, but if you start to see that your system slows down when you are trying to submit something, it may mean that your sample, the file size is just too large and it slows down the system.
Is it the limit, is it 5 minutes per piece or 5 minutes total?
5 minutes total. Oh, sorry, 5 minutes per piece and 2 pieces total. So if you have 2 videos, that might mean 10 minutes of video. The other thing I didn't mention is you do have the option of providing a hyperlink. So you may have something on YouTube, Vimeo. You can submit a link to a video that you've already got on the web.
Okay, let's see. Can we submit both images and audio files using a hyperlink? Yes, that's what you just said, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, if we have video that shows our arts education, including student interviews, but includes information about a previous fundraiser, is that considered strictly marketing?
No, marketing would be like let's say you just sent us a bunch of images of like some of the postcards that you're using, like brochures or something that you're using to promote one of the events. Or like, let's say if you have a like something that it's like a commercial, like if you created like a really like highly edited piece to promote something through social media or through YouTube or something, that's what we mean when we say marketing materials.
How old can the samples be?
We request that it not be more than 2 years old. And we do ask the question of when, the question on the description, it asks you what year was this from. So hopefully it's something no later than like 2017.
Okay, is there a limit to number of pages in a PowerPoint, which you addressed? Let's see, are you also asking for photos?
You can, if you're allowed to submit photo, you can submit a photo, or sorry, photos, 10 images, up to 10 images, but you're not required to. So it's really up to you. Just you really have to look at the guidelines and see, depending on your discipline, what you're allowed to submit. So for example, music organizations, I don't think music organizations are allowed to submit PowerPoints, but you can submit audio or video files.
Okay. And can you submit a PowerPoint as a multi-page PDF, or does it need to be a PowerPoint document?
As long as we can see, yeah, a PDF is fine. As long as it's one image per slide and you know, the format looks like a slideshow, that's fine.
Okay, you mentioned we can submit more than one artistic sample. How many? Is it 2 with 10 images each?
You can't, yeah, so depending on what the requirement is, if you are allowed to submit PowerPoints, you could potentially submit 2 PowerPoint files. Each of those PowerPoint files should not have more than 10 images per slide, per file.
All right, that's all I have for now.
Great. Okay, so let's watch a video now. We have a video sample. This video was submitted by Peter Performance Space. They're an OGP2 organization in the dance discipline. This submission was a proposal for funding to support Peter's Dance Artists in Residency program. And the way that they explain the sample, it's a collage overview of Peter's programming, including classes, workshops, live events, performances, and commissioned new work.
Peter is a nonprofit organization that provides space for dancers to create their society.
Okay, I'm gonna replay that. Sounds like it wasn't playing the video. Can you all see this screen now with the video on it? Dan? Sorry, Anne, are you there? Can you see this video on the screen?
No, I can't see. I just see the PowerPoint card.
Oh, okay. One more time. You're seeing it now, Anne?
No, not yet.
Sorry. All right, let me try this one more time. How about now, Anne?
Yes.
All right. Okay, let's play it.
Peter is a nonprofit organization that provides a space for dancers to create a nurturing society. Based on holistic support for all bodies, an open exchange of ideas, and a reciprocity of generosity, Peter is a place to be comfortable in the body, mind, spirit. Through workshops, classes, public performances, and residencies, dancers work and play together in a non-hierarchical environment. Ideas are embodied, exchanged, and transformed rather than owned. There is a belief in abundance and goodness. There is a belief that everyone has something to give. At Peter, brave dancing bodies are at home.
All right, everyone. So I'm sure there might be questions about artistic examples. Hopefully you all were able to see that okay. Really what I thought was interesting about this one, it's short, it's a compilation, but you still get to see the quality of the programming. You get to see, you know, the joy in the dancers' faces. It makes you feel like you're there, like you're in that room. And I think that's the strength of this sample. You also got a little bit of a narration from Dorothy, the director, kind of explaining what they're all about, their philosophy, and the importance of the work, which I think is great to hear, you know, while you're watching some of that programming happening. So this is a little fancy there, and this may be like, maybe, you know, you're not this tech savvy, and that's okay. You know, captions also work. You can do captions. You can submit that description in the application, and I'll read it before playing the sample. But so this is just kind of for you to see, you know, these are two OGP2 organizations. These are smaller budget organizations, how they put their best foot forward and really gave you a snapshot of their work. So I'll stop in case there's any questions.
Yes. Is there going to be any consideration given to the fact that performing arts companies have been shut down for 6 months and are not allowed to engage in any rehearsals or performances other than virtually right now? We'll need to use some sort of archival footage.
Yes. Yes, that's why when I was talking about like the year of the sample, like if it needs to be like a 2017 or a 2018 sample, that's fine. You know, it really, you just want to make sure that it's not so outdated that the panelists visibly can see that it's an outdated piece. And you want to make sure that it's relevant to what the project is. So yeah, that might mean you have to submit an older piece and that you know, that is not as recent as like this past year. And that's totally fine. Thank you for asking that question.
And I think that's it for now.
Okay, thank you. So arts education projects. We have quite a large number of organizations in the OGP program that are arts education organizations. And a lot of the programs that happen are, a lot of them are after school, out of school programs. So programs that happen outside of the school yards, or outside of the school site. So depending on what type of arts education programming you're doing, you're gonna wanna make sure you take a look at our definitions. Oh, I'm sorry, am I not sharing right now? Hopefully you can see my screen. Take a look at our definitions for arts education programming. So that you can understand, based off those definitions, what your required documentation is going to be. In-school programming, for example, these are programs that happen in partnership with a school during the regular school day in or off the school campus. So these might be things like in-school experiences, off-site experiences in partnership with the school, a museum tour, artist residencies, field trips, or presentations during the school day. Out-of-school programming are programs that are services that are provided in partnership with the school and intended specifically for enrollees of that respective school, but not provided during the school day. And then we have community-based programming. So this would be services provided to children or youth and or their families outside of school property and not in partnership with any particular educational institution or school. So either way, if you're an arts education organization, you will want to make sure that you have answered the arts education questionnaire, the questions on the arts education task of the application. If your core audience, the audience that you are, or the participants that you are working with are majority youth, under our definitions, you will be considered an arts education organization. And so we will want to hear more about the quality of that teaching and learning. So ask yourself, you know, whether or not you're an arts education organization, and if you are, you're going to want to provide details about the program, the objectives, the youth served, and how your team is going to fulfill those objectives. You're going to want to describe your team's qualifications. How are they qualified to work with the youth that are, you know, that they're working with? If your organization is doing in-school or out-of-school programming, you'll want to provide a curriculum sample, and that curriculum should be aligned with the visual and performing arts content standards of the state of California. If you'd like to see an example of those content standards, click on this link in this PowerPoint. This takes you directly to the new content standards. They were updated in I believe it's 2019. So you want to make sure you're taking a look at this new updated version of the content standards. And community-based programming, you're not required to submit a curriculum, but if you have one, you should submit it. It might be helpful for the panelists to see kind of how you are putting this work together and the importance of the work for the participants. So if you have it, submit it. If you don't, and you're a community-based program or project, don't worry about submitting that curriculum. It's optional. The panelists that will be reviewing applications for arts education projects or programs will be arts educators. So they will be looking through kind of how the organization is providing quality programming. And so you want to make sure that you're providing all of this information under the arts education task. The samples also, you want to make sure if you have them, that you submit a video of the teaching that happens. So you can submit a piece that is like the final piece, like maybe you are a music organization who does arts, music training or workshops with youth, and you have a final piece from a final performance. You can submit that, but you would also want to submit the preparation. How are these youth being prepared for that final performance or piece that they put together? So if you have that, definitely you want to make sure you submit that with your samples. So I'll stop for any arts education questions. Okay, sounds like there's none. So we will move on. Let's take a quick breather. This was a lot of information, so I know you might need like a minute to process. And so we'll take a quick second to just kind of take a deep breath and kind of process a little bit. And if there's anything that's come up, you can ask that now in the chat box. If there's anything about any of the other sections of the application you want to ask, feel free to ask. Otherwise, we will move into what the grant application looks like on our grant portal. So this is the grant portal. It will be available for you to apply under at the URL https://www.apply-lacdac.smapply.io. This is the new URL for our new grant portal. We have migrated, so we are no longer using Fluid Review for this new application cycle. All OGP applications, grant reports, forms, and materials must now be submitted via this SurveyMonkey Apply system. Tips for when you go in here, even probably before you go in here. If you're a returning grantee, you're going to log in. Don't register. You already have an account available. Just log in with your credentials from the Fluid Review site. If you're a new grantee, you're going to want to register for a new account. So when you register for that new account, make sure that you associate yourself with an organization, because the application, the OGP application, is only available to organizations. So when you register, make sure you're associated with an organization so that you have access to the application. This site is not our website. So, this link is available in the guidelines. So if you need to get in here and you're just lost, you can either go into the guidelines and click on the link in the guidelines. This link is also available on our very front, on our home page. If you ever are just like, I don't know how to get into this application, visit our website, go to the home page, and it's on the slide. It's the very front image is going to be a link to this application. We're hoping that you won't run into any technical issues as you're going through this application. That being said, this is a new system. Us as staff, we're also learning how to use this system. So give yourself time to get through any weird technical glitches or issues that you may run into. Make sure that you have enough time to like deal with those, that you can, you know, if you need to talk with tech support for, you know, a weird glitch that you just don't understand and the grant staff don't know how to fix it, you may need to open up a ticket with tech support. We're hoping that doesn't happen, but want to make sure you have enough time to do that. So try to get into the system early on, so that you're not, you know, kind of dealing with a really stressful issue at the very last minute on the day of the deadline. Strongly recommend, if it's possible, to submit your application in at least 5 days prior to the deadline to ensure you're not kind of running into issues with technology or anything like that. So to register, you click on this green button at the very top of the screen on the right side. And you're going to submit your own information, so your own personal information, your name, your email, you're going to create a password, and then make sure that you record that username and password for the future, because if your organization receives this funding, you're going to need to get back into the system to submit reports and to submit invoices. So make sure you keep that username and password available for yourself, but also in the future for anyone else who may take over some of this grant requirement responsibility. The system allows you to provide a logo. So if you want to submit a logo for your organization, you can do that. It's not required, but if you want to, you can do that. And then once you've done your own information, then you'll create your organizational account information. So you will provide the legal name of the organization, the popular name if it's different. Your FEIN number is going to be required, your DUNS number, the main address, city and state, website, the phone number of the organization, things like that. I'd recommend that if you can get a preview of the application and start kind of filling out the narrative portions of the application in a Word document, so you're not dealing with like a potential glitch where you lose all your text while you're in the system. That's the best practice. Put it all in a Word document and just copy and paste those responses into the application. And also, if you run into any weird issues, definitely you can email us, grants@arts.lacounty.gov, and we can try to troubleshoot. And then if there's anything we cannot troubleshoot on our end, we will then ask you to open up a ticket with tech support. Always start, if you can, make sure that you start with the SME data art stuff, because that will be the, it'll take you the longest to do that piece. So once you've registered and you've got an account and you've got an organization associated with your account, you'll be able to see the applications that are available, including, so it'll be organizational grant program, community impact arts grant, and the arts internship program. You're going to find the OGP application and click start. You may not fill everything out all at once. Probably won't. So if you need to save and come back later, you would save your work, log out, and then when you come back into this, log in and find the application. It's going to be listed in your dashboard as like a little card. So find the OGP card and click on the green continue button. And on, above that continue button, you'll be able to see how far along you've gotten. It keeps track. So you've got something telling you how much progress you've made. So for this one, for example, 1 of the 15 tasks have been completed. So once you're in, so like you've typed everything, you've typed in everything that you need to type in to get into the account. This is what the dashboard for the application looks like. These are all the forms you're going to fill out in the application. They're listed for you here. And when you start clicking into these, this little your tasks table will be on the left side of the screen as you're filling out your application. And you'll be able to keep track of everything, of your progress on the upper left corner in the tracking bar, the progress bar, sorry. So you can, once you've done the 501c3 verification and the eligibility questionnaire, you'll have access to all the rest of these tasks and you'll be able to start wherever you need to start. So like, let's say you may want to start under project, budget and project. That's where the request calculator is. So that's where you're going to put in your budget size and your request amount. You can do that. Or you may want to start from the very beginning at number 1. Either way, just know that some of these tasks are automatically filling from the budget and project tasks. So all of the budgets, the project revenue and project expenses are auto-filling your request amount from task number 2, budget and project. So just be really careful. If you change, if like you make an error or something and you want to change something in the budget and project section, make sure you resave that information if you change it, because you want to make sure that tasks 6 and 7, the project revenue and expenses, are also updated with that newer information. Make sure you're saving often, and that once you're done with with filling everything out, that you download and save a copy of the document. And just know that 3.1, cultural equity and inclusion statement, policy, or plan, that task specifically is only visible, once we get to panel review, it will only be visible to the staff, not to panelists. So though you are submitting statement, policies, and plans with the application, the staff will review those documents to ensure you've submitted them, that you complied with that requirement, but the panelists will not be reading any of those documents. So it'll be really important that if there's any information in any of those documents you want to share, that you want to make sure the panelists get to read, that you put that information in your organizational narrative. I'll stop there in case there's any questions.
Okay, there are a few questions. What should we do if there's been a leadership change and a new person is applying for the grant this year? Can we create a new account?
If you don't have access to the username and password for that person who had submitted the application in prior years, then you may need to just create a new account. And what we would do is just have you kind of associate your new account with your organization. So yeah, if there's no other way to do it, yeah, the only way would be to start a new account.
Okay, and someone did try to access the application, but they were having everything. It said everything worked with the login, but number 4, the application didn't open.
If you didn't get to see the application when you logged in, you filled everything out, but the application didn't pop up for you, that may mean that you need to make sure that you're linked to an organization. Because if you're not linked to an organization, like you're trying to apply to this grant as an individual, you're not going to have access, because this application is only visible to organizations. So it may mean going back to your account settings, to your account eligibility questionnaire, and taking a look to make sure that you're actually associated with an organization. You should have made sure that your FEIN number was included, because you do need to get through that 501c3 verification. Okay, sounds like that was the last question.
Yeah, that's what we have now.
Oh, sorry, let me just make sure I add. Sometimes the system can be a little glitchy with specific web browsers. So if you're having trouble and you're in Internet Explorer, for example, close out of Internet Explorer and open the URL in Google Chrome or Safari, and that may fix any glitches that you're running into. We have seen that happen with specific web browsers like Internet Explorer. Okay, so let's talk about the application narrative. There are several areas in the application where we will ask you for kind of a little bit of a story. Like we'll want to hear your story, the story of the organization. So like I was saying earlier, take a look at the application questions and start with a Word document. Start early, start with a Word document. Take a look at the word counts, the maximum number of characters you can put into the response so that you can keep track of that on your Word document. And that's how you'll want to make sure that you're both within the character count and that you're not running into weird glitches or where the system stalls and you've lost your word. So definitely Word document is a good way to start. Start early. You're going to tell the story of your organization in 3 different areas of the application: the organization narrative, the project narrative, and then the project budgets. These you'll want to make sure that the story is easy for the panelists to understand, and you're doing that with words and you're doing it with numbers. So the narrative, really, this is the place where you're going to talk about the specifics of the organization, the evolution, how you've gotten to this point, where you started, how you created this programming, what the goals are now, what are your current goals, and why are these current goals important for your long-term vision? How are they helping you push your mission forward? What will help you achieve those goals? So those are the kinds of questions you want to ask yourself is, who do you want to serve? What do you uniquely provide to LA County residents? How have you addressed any challenges that may have come up? How's your staff and leadership trained and qualified to lead your project? Be transparent. Take your time to craft, a project narrative that explains in detail how you'll use the funding, who it will serve, and how you'll evaluate the achievements of the project you produce. Avoid hyperbole. This is not the time for hyperbole or repetition. Try not to be overly verbose. I would say use bullet points whenever you are able to. Answer each question as efficiently as you can and then move on to the next. And if you're referring to something in one of your responses that you've already, like maybe there's an answer that you want to give in a question that you've already given in a different spot in the application, just refer back to it so that the panelists, as they're reading through, is not reading repetitive information. Just refer back. Use your real estate wisely. You have a certain amount of space, so you want to make sure you're using it wisely. Don't use marketing information like you don't need to you don't need to give details on like you have this amazing performer that you contracted, like things like that. Like I would say anything that seems like marketing information about your season may not may be too much detail. So really you want to give like a high level overview of what you're doing, and then in the project narrative you're kind of giving the idea of how the project funding will help you to move forward with this project. And so you want to make sure that you are addressing not just what the season calendar is going to be, but what the goals and needs of the organization are and how they'll be addressed through this narrative. Ask yourself why the panelists should care. connect the dots for the reader, title back to a long-term mission, and make sure it's that you're consistent and clear. That's the key, right? So you want to tie everything together so that the narrative is easy to understand. Whenever there's like a question, because maybe there was some missing information or some of the information in the narrative didn't totally match up with what the panelist is seeing in the numbers, like in the funder report, those are red flags. And so you want to avoid that type of kind of discrepancy. Be clear and concise, and watch out for character limits. Have somebody proofread your application before you submit it. You don't want to submit something that's got lots of like errors, misspellings, or like something I've seen commonly is errors in like the dates, because you may be reusing some of the narratives. That's not uncommon. We know sometimes you reuse some of the portions of your narratives from prior applications. That's fine, but make sure you proofread, and if there's bold dates in that information, update them. Don't provide something from last year that, you know, just throws off the panelists and then becomes like a question and a red flag. So these are under the organizational narrative. These are the sections of the organizational narrative you're going to answer. We know that you may be submitting a grant, not just for the county, but maybe you're submitting also for a city funding. There's like City of LA, City of Pasadena, City of Long Beach. You may be answering these questions, these same questions on other applications. So what we've done is we share our questions from our organizational narrative with other municipalities so that we're all kind of on the same page. And so if you need to kind of copy and paste some of this information, it's easy for you to do because it's formulated in a very similar way. So we will all ask, what is your mission? We'll all ask, what is your history in programming? What is, who are the leaders of the organization? How do you plan your programming? Who is the target audience and community? And so you'll be able to kind of reuse some of this narrative information for other grants. You'll want to make sure that you're answering each of the prompt questions under these sections. So you'll see you'll have a question and then you'll have prompts. Answer those prompts. And for the there are two spots where you're going to answer information about cultural equity and inclusion. It's going to be under planning and leadership and under community and core audience. So for planning and leadership, these questions are linked to specific review criteria. This is review criteria number 2. So this is managerial, management capacity and managerial excellence. So you're answering questions about planning and leadership, but also specifically about your vision around cultural equity and inclusion. What steps are you taking, you know, around creating more diversity, equity, and inclusion in programming, in leadership? What engagement strategies you're using? So, you know, definitely make sure that you are answering those questions. There's no one-size-fits-all approach, and you know that. This work on cultural equity, there's no wrong answer because everyone has their own entry point. And so really what you want to make sure you're doing is that you're providing the panelists with information about your unique approach and strategies that you've implemented to reflect these values. Also, quick note, we've updated the character counts on some of these. So some of these are actually, you've got a little bit more real estate to answer these questions, these newer questions. And then just a reminder that OGP 1, if your project is for sustainability category project, you may not actually have to submit information about your project proposal because it will be, your project is actually in the organizational narrative. It's something that you're doing for sustainability, and so you'll be able to answer those questions within the organizational narrative. So then we have questions about your community and audiences. In this section, you're going to want to describe in as much detail as you can your audience and your community. You'll be asked to describe the activities and strategies that you've implemented or are planning to implement in the future around the values of cultural equity and inclusion in the arts. Take a look at the application sample to see what the exact question is so that you can review those in advance. Basically, what we're hoping is that by answering these questions that you're painting a picture for the panelists to provide them with a little bit of information about the demographics of the groups that you're serving. You're not serving the whole of LA County. And I know that's something that we commonly see as an organization may say, our programming serves all of LA County. No one can actually say that for certain. You may have data that you can use to be a little bit more specific. So if you're using a survey, try to create a picture using some of that survey data. If you can capture some of this information through census data using zip codes, try to see if you can do that. Give as much quantitative info as you can to capture information about your audiences and participants. Be creative in your explanation. Tell the panelists where your audiences are coming from, why they attend, and why they attend your events. And help panelists to understand how you reach out to those audiences and provide programs and services that are compelling to them. If you've made changes that speak to your cultural equity and inclusion vision, highlight those in your response to these questions. How do you determine what your programming will entail each season? Is your organization using survey data? Do you ask your attendees how they felt about the events, performances, exhibits they attended? How do you capture that information? The panelists will want to know what that feedback loop is. They want to know that you are striving to understand your audiences and what's important to them. And then again, here for cultural equity and inclusion, there is a new question that you want to make sure you're answering, which is articulate. They're asking you to articulate how you have taken steps to integrate and reflect the values of cultural equity and inclusion externally via marketing, programming partnerships, outreach, audience engagement, or other strategies. And you're going to want to make sure you've given some specific details about this effort and the progress made in the last 2 or more years. So I'll stop here in case there's any questions about the narrative. All right, sounds like we've covered that. Okay. So tips on completing your budgets. The budgets should really be specific to the grant period. And the grant period, it starts July 1, 2021 and ends June 30, 2023. So all of your income and expenses that you're showing in the application should fall within those dates. And make sure not to enter just your annual budget. It should be specific to the project, and you're going to want to make sure you're providing some context for these numbers. This is what the income, project matching income table looks like. If you're applying again, you've applied in the past, this section of the application is completely different. In prior years, you would have had to basically itemize each source of matching income. You no longer have to do that. You can provide a summary explanation in the text box. You still have to say specifically how much you're going to use, like how much are you going to provide in matching revenue from in year 1 and in year 2. And that should be equal to or greater than the request amount. You'll still have to put that number in, but the explanation, basically where that money is coming from, you can summarize that in the text box. So this can be coming from contributed revenue. It might be coming from earned revenue. So do your best to kind of project out. This is like almost a year out. So you may not know exactly where this money is going to come from, but you might have a good idea of like how much of this might be coming from board member contributions or ticket revenue from events in the past, or maybe this is going to come from a big fundraiser you're going to be doing. Try to project out what that's going to look like. And the reason that we've kind of updated this matching revenue table, one of the main reasons is that we know that this is almost a full year out. And you may not have confirmed sources of income, and that's fine. So you do your best to just kind of project out. And you can use a bullet point outline to give, what those sources are and approximately how much you're thinking it might be. You can use grant money. So if it's coming from like one of the municipal grant funds or one of the state funds or the NEA, you can put all of that in here and just kind of delineate like what those sources are and how much you're thinking it's going to be that you're going to be earning from that, bringing in from that specific source. So put in those explanations and then save and continue. And then once you've completed it, you can mark it as complete. Reminder, you don't need new sources of income. So you might be using like the same sources of income that you use every year. It doesn't have to be a brand new source of income. It can be like what you've always, some of the revenue that you've always been able to capture through, concessions or ticket revenue, whatever it is. And we have a little worksheet linked at the top of the page that may be helpful for kind of figuring out what these details are going to be. And then the second reminder that I have is that the grant has to be matched dollar for dollar. So make sure that the math, when you're doing that math on the total matching revenue year 1 and year 2, that number is greater than or equal to total OGP request. Oh, and I should say, this is 2 years of funding, right? So take that into consideration. So if your request is for $2,700, then you're matching $2,700 of through your matching source of income. It can be $2,700 or it can be more than that, but it can't be less than that. Okay. So hopefully this new kind of this new update to this project income, matching income table, it makes things a little bit easier to kind of just discuss in your application. And then we have the project expenses table. This has not changed. So here, the objective with this table is to provide details on how you'll be spending the funds from the grant. Each of the years of the grant, obviously you're going to have expenses. You only receive half of the request amount each year. And for each of those years, you have to have a matching source dollar for dollar. So this budget expense table has a validation function in it so that you can't get the math wrong. So it will sum up all of your line items to make sure that you do not have an error, so that your request is not more than what you're spending in matching sources of income. So this table can be a little bit confusing. And really, like, what I like to kind of help people understand is that your project may be just to pay a salary. And if that's the case, your request expenses and match expenses will all be on that one line item for salaries. Alternatively, you may have a big production that you're going to be supporting through this grant funding. So in the request column for year 1, for example, you would say maybe some of the funding is going to go towards somebody's salary, but you're also going to have expenses around the production. So what will those production costs be? And those obviously would be paid out of the matching sources of income, because you only have a certain amount of money from the request. So the rest of that spending is going to be done through the matching sources. So hopefully that kind of explains a little bit more about how you're filling this out. But just know, you know, you're going to want to make sure that your math is not is correct. And if it's not correct, you're going to see at the very bottom of the table, the very last line is the amounts meet or exceed requirement. If you get a false in any of those boxes, that means the math might be wrong. Or the other thing that sometimes will cause a false or an error is if there is a decimal, a comma, or a dollar sign in any of your figures. Make sure you're not using decimals, commas, or dollar signs on any of these amounts. Just the numbers. So this helps the panelists understand how this funding is going to be used over the next few years. You're creating a budget for year 1 and a budget for year 2, and then you're explaining all of these expenses in the project expense explanations. Before I move on to the review criteria, I'll stop in case there's a question about any of the project budgets.
Yes, you may have covered this one, but if we're applying for salary support for 2 executive staff members, the project budget is for their salaries?
Yes. Yeah, so you may only have, so if that's the case, you would only have 1 line item. But the project, but put that into context, right? In your narrative, why are you paying those salaries? What's important about making sure that you're able to support and sustain those 2 staff members? How are they involved in the work of the organization, and how do they help you meet your long-term goals and mission, really? So that's how you kind of formulate the rest of the narrative. Though the spending is only on 2 salaries, there's a reason that those 2 salaries are important for the organization. There's a reason that this funding is specifically going to be allotted for those 2 staff members. So make that case in your narrative. Anything else? Okay, I'll move on to the review criteria. So when you're looking at the samples of the application of all the questions, you're going to see that in parentheses, there will be criteria under each question. These criteria, when you see criteria 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these are basically indications for you to know what the panelists are looking for in these answers. And so we actually have an explanation of this review criteria that the panelists actually use to kind of determine their scores and their comments. It's in the guidelines, it's at the very end. So if you want to see what those panelists are going to be using to make these kind of comments and scores, read through that review criteria. It's really interesting. So we have 5 review criteria. It's a total of 100 points that you can receive on your application. Highest or the largest portion of the score is going to be under artistic quality. So whenever you see criterion 1 marked on those questions, that means that some of that information will be used for determining the quality of the artistic product. And so you want to make sure that you're kind of taking a look at what that means. What does high quality artistic programming mean for a panelist? So criterion 1 is artistic quality, it's up to 35 points. Criterion 2, up to 15 points. This is where they're looking at your kind of organizational readiness for OGP 1, management capacity for OGP 2, and then managerial excellence for OGP 3 and 4. This is staggered. Obviously, we have higher standards as you move up into larger budget sizes. We're holding the organization to a higher standard, and that's why you're seeing the staggered kind of definition. Criterion 3 is quality of project plan. It's up to 20 points here. So you want to make sure that you've got a very clear, specific plan, that you're helping the panelists understand what the purpose of the project is. And so you get up to 20 points there. Quality of project evaluation. There is a question about how you'll evaluate your progress on this project, up to 5 points, and that's criterion 4. And then lastly, criterion 5, up to 25 points here, response to community need, or relationship with community, or defined address community need, depending on the budget size. That's criterion 5, and that makes up the total 100 points. So read through that review criteria. Each piece of this application is going to help the panelists understand why this project will make a difference for your organization, and it'll help it all make sense for them. The artistic samples will bring that narrative to life. They'll boost an average narrative. It'll help paint the picture for the reader. Connect the dots for those panelists, make sure they aren't left wondering or unclear about anything on the application. And remember, these panelists are your peers, right? So we are hoping that they understand what high quality work within that discipline that you're applying under looks like, feels like, sounds like. And they will know what it takes to achieve that level of work, both administratively and artistically. A note for applicants that are reapplying, that those 2 new questions for cultural equity and inclusion are linked to criterion 2 and 5. And that's actually a note for all applicants, that criterion 2 and 5, that's where they're going to be looking at your cultural equity and inclusion responses. So it's important to read that review criteria to understand how these panelists will be looking at the responses, and then read through the guidelines to see that language for these updated criteria. And we are almost out of time. So just a quick, remember this checklist, just reminding you that you should use this checklist before you even go into this application. Take a look at this thing. Make sure you've that you've checked everything off before you even go into the application. And then these are the optional additional items. And unless you're an arts education organization that is doing in-school or out-of-school programming, you don't need to provide a curriculum sample if you're doing community programming. Take a look at those guidelines. These links here will take you directly to our website where you can download the guidelines and download the sample application. You can also download this PowerPoint from these 2 pages, or from this page, sorry. The online application is available in the SurveyMonkey Apply website. This link should have been updated. Don't use this link. This is for fluid review. The new updated link is in the guidelines. And then just a quick overview of the kind of timeline on this. We do not give extensions, unfortunately. So please make sure that you are able to provide and submit all of this information, documentation, 5 days prior to the deadline. The deadline is October 14th by 11:59 p.m. PST. We are normally available up to about 6 p.m. on those deadline days. So past 6 p.m., you may not be able to reach us. So we don't want you to run into a situation where you can't reach us and you're having a technical problem. So try to get it in early. In February and March, approximately 16 panel meetings will happen, and roughly 80 panelists will be reading through these applications. It will be in order of discipline. So we will have each discipline-specific panelists in each of these panel review meetings. They will probably happen through Zoom, I'm assuming. And then in July, we're hoping that in July, we'll be able to send out notifications. This year for 2020, the notifications were delayed by about a month. We're hoping that that doesn't happen in 2021, but just be prepared. We're hoping that by July you'll get a notification, but we'll let you know if that is going to be actually, if there's going to be a delay. So get it in early, and you know, obviously you should reach out to us if you're having any issues with any of the application tasks or anything that you just are, it's, you know, you're getting confused about. You know, feel free to reach out to us. The applications are reviewed and scored by a grant peer review panel, which is made up of artists, arts professionals, community members, and others with knowledge and professional qualifications in the arts and with familiarity of the LA region arts sector. Whether you do or do not receive the funding, which at this point about 90% of applicants are receiving the funds when they apply, you will be able to get panel feedback from us via a panel feedback call, and you'll know what your score is when we send out your notification. So these notes from the panelists, they're helpful. This is our way of kind of providing a little bit of technical assistance through the feedback that you receive from the panel of peers. And so if there's any final questions, I can take them now. And if you're actually, you know, if you've gotten everything you needed to get, this is basically the end of the webinar. But I will take any last questions now. Sounds like no questions. So we do have a Zoom office hours after this. So if something came up, you know, and we've ended the webinar, feel free, you know, to stay on the line. We're gonna have this line open for any office hour questions. I am seeing the chat box flashing, so there may be some questions popping up now. Okay, people are saying thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. So this is the end of the webinar. Thank you for being on the line. We are very excited to help you and read through your applications, provide any support. If you need support, feel free to reach out. You have our email here. And like I said, if you need to kind of check in with me one-on-one, we've got office hours on the same Zoom line. So feel free to kind of either take a break and come back. We'll be on the line until about 5:30. And if you're ready to log out, you can log out. Thank you for being online.